up to everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. For those of you who don't know him, his name is Cole Williams. He's a parent, a mentor, community leader here in Grand Rapids. He has over 10 years of experience working with adolescent males who come from abuse and neglectful backgrounds. Cole is the co-founder of the Delta Project, whose mission is to break the generational cycles of incarceration by reconnecting youth of color to community relationships through mentorship, coaching, and storytelling. He is the creator of Cole Speaks LLC, which is a workshop series led by him and his son, Nate. In conjunction to Cole Speaks, Cole also provides mandated parenting classes for families receiving juvenile justice services in Kent and Ottawa County. And if that's not enough, if you don't think that he's busy enough with all of that, my favorite thing that Cole does or did as a part of is he created and developed an African-American comic book series titled The Fatherhood. And he might speak to this, but I wanted to make sure that everyone knew about this. It's a graphic novel series for boys and young men of color, used to facilitate book clubs or small groups with boys in detention or residential treatment programs, schools, after-school programs in our vulnerable communities. So we have at WMPC a few of his graphics from the comic book, and it is my favorite piece of art in our office. So I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to that, Cole. But with all of that being said, I will kind of turn it over to you.
Man, Felicia, thank you so much. One, I wasn't expecting to hear the comic book come up, so that just brought like a huge, big smile on my face. Well, first of all, I want to, so thank you for that. But I also want to take a few minutes just to thank all the people that are in this room this morning. I don't know about you, but sometimes just getting up and getting moving and jumping into another Zoom can definitely be taxing or can be overwhelming, but I'm really glad that you're here this morning. I also want to thank Foster Kent Kids, WMPC, and DHS for, putting on a series like this. I think it's necessary and important, not just only for parents that are involved in foster care and adoption, but also for workers and just folks in the community to really have a better understanding of what the needs are as it relates to the work that we're doing to serve the children in our community. So I am really honored and glad to be here. What is really funny, y'all, is that I have a slide that's 86 slides. We will not go through that whole slide, I promise you, because we won't have as much time as allowed. But I do want to take this time to walk you through a couple of things that really are important as we begin to unpack what it means to parent during a pandemic. So I am going to share my screen with you. And please don't laugh, because sometimes my screen can have all kinds of stuff, but I'm in it to win it. So let's see if it works. Yeah, so parenting during a pandemic, that is, it's funny, I never thought I'd ever be doing a presentation that even had the word pandemic in it. And so for us to find ourselves in this new way of living and parenting can definitely be taxing. But also, I've also seen some amazing rewards happen as it relates to families sort of reconnecting with each other. So I want to just walk us through a couple of things that I've explored, I've experienced, maybe not from firsthand parenting, because I am a parent where all my sons are now young adults, but I am now experiencing parenting from that space of my own worries and concerns about what it means to have adult children out in the community during this crisis that we find ourselves in. So I wanted to cover a couple of objectives that I think are really important so that we have a real understanding of what I'm hoping to do today. One of those is to really understand that you are not alone. In this process, I think that the pandemic has definitely helped me realize how isolated that we have become or can become as it relates to our relationships with our families and our friends, understanding the impact of stress and how it plays and interacts with not only ourselves, but also how it plays and interacts and interfaces with our families, understanding that self-care is really important and that we have to put some importance to that. I think we talk a great deal about self-care, but the actual parts of doing self-care during a pandemic can be much harder than, once was. And then to provide you some strategies and some tools to really help you combat some of the challenges you might be experiencing as you're navigating this space. So I think that there are a variety of people and professions in this space. So, this is really, really tailored to you as an individual and you as a parent, or even if you're someone who is parenting or working with a parent. So we all know the Zoom culture. So I just want to make sure that you know where to mute, where you can see each other, and make sure you are dropping chat information in there. So if there's something that I say, there's something that resonates with you, please feel free to comment, sharing reactions. I'm gonna try my best to try to see those reactions, right? But if I don't get a chance to see it, there will be someone else in this space that can see it. So if you see something or experience something that resonates with you, drop a feeling in there, a reaction to that. I think again, when we're talking about parenting during the pandemic, one of the big pieces is emotions and feelings, right? So now that we're doing that, I want you to try it out or continue to try it out. So, and I might start talking fast too, because I'm super excited and there's so much I want to cover, right? But one of the check-in questions I have for everybody, just to begin to think about, is actually, what is your why? Why did you show up for a training like this? Why did you agree to participate in something like this? And why does this even matter, right? And of course, you can drop that in the chat. But I'm really interested in just sort of knowing why you showed up, and while you are dropping that stuff in the chat, right? Feel free to share those things, because I think it's important for others to sort of see again that we are not alone. And so when that we can see it within the very context of the training, it's really important. So I'll tell you why I am doing this kind of work. And there's a lot of things that I do. So I wear a lot of hats. But I do that specifically for this very reason. I think that it's really important. And this is actually an image of myself and my nephew. But the quote in there really means a lot to me. It says, "A boy's image of himself can be mirrored by the men in front of him." And so the reason why I have my whole life has really been dedicated to working with young fathers, working with young men of color, both incarcerated and within the community, is really centered around this notion that we can become mirrors and windows for young people to see themselves in and see themselves through. And that's something that I didn't necessarily have growing up, but I recognized the importance of it as I started to become a parent myself. And here's my big why too. These are my sons. And, one of the things that I am really excited about is that I had an opportunity to not be a bio parent, but I also became a foster parent. And also at some point, even a step parent. And so, now I'm a parent of now young adults from as young as 23 to as old as 28. And we started out as like this. And actually, this image for me is very powerful, because this actually is an image that sort of really represents the work that, I've been charged to do within this community. And I love to talk about the cycle of the foster care system and DHS in my life, because many of my sons came from the neglect abuse system, right? And these were just some of the foster care agencies that they moved through. These are some of the residential treatment services that they were involved in. These were the number of foster homes that they were in before they got to me. And then some of my sons transitioned into the criminal justice system. Many of them were involved in the mental health system, and also many of my sons were also prescribed medications that impacted, of course, or supported their mental health. And so I think this is why I'm here, because I cannot even imagine what it might feel like to be raising a child who is coming from all of these different backgrounds in a pandemic. But I can tell you that recognizing that this work is so important, and the work that you do. So if you are on here and you're a foster parent, you're adopted parent, or you're a bio parent, what you do really truly matters, and it has such a great impact on your children and your family. And so your overall self-care is so necessary. And that's one of the things I don't think I did a really good job of when parenting children from these spaces. So even though I wasn't involved in the pandemic, I really felt like I had a pandemic in my home because I wasn't necessarily taking care of myself. And of course, this is us smiling. And I always use this photo as a reminder of, how important family is. And of course, all of my sons didn't live with us during the time of this photo. Many of my sons have transitioned back home to their families, but I think it's just important to just kind of highlight what happens to youth in our communities who are aging out of foster care, the lack of resources and support as it relates to access to adults and loving, caring community members is really necessary and important. And so even though my sons weren't living with me, that we were still an extended family to them. And I think that's really important, not only as we talk about this pandemic, most importantly, as we talk about this pandemic, because it does matter who these our children in our community have access to. And it is really important that they have access to members in the community that, like yourselves, who are on today, who really believe in the work that we're doing as it relates to supporting kids in our villages. So this is an image that sort of represents for me the power of the village. So to kick us off, so that's me, that's why I'm here, that's why I do the work that I do. And I hope that as you were able to drop while you were here, that folks were able to find some connection. Because I think this image that's in front of you really speaks to all of us. It says we are all weathering the same storm, but in different boats. And so I think that we all come from different backgrounds, different situations, right? Different experiences, which of course is what makes this pot so beautiful. But I think it also can be isolating too, especially when we don't think that other folks are experiencing or going through some of the same things that we are going through. So just want you to know that we're all doing this together, and you're not alone. You're not alone at all. Let's see. So here's a couple of things that I've heard from parents. I'm just trying to not mess my kids up, right? I don't know about any of you, but that has definitely been a thing for families. It's just, I'm challenged, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overworked. And the last thing I want to do as a mom or dad is mess my kids up, right? I'm at my wit's end, day in and day out, is a comment from a parent. My plate is just too full. I can't be the professional partner, parent, lover, fun machine, teacher, all at the same time during a pandemic, right? Some days I'm so busy, I don't feel like I even exist. I wish I had more time to recharge. And my partner and I struggle to keep it going. I feel like I'm working to support them, and I don't know if any of this resonates with you at all, but I'm going to be honest with you. Part of me wanting to do this training is to really, really have just a real conversation. We may not get through all of these slides because there might be just a couple of things that I think that we should unpack. But I do think it's important for us to begin to recognize that, man, it is hard during this pandemic to really be everything that everybody is asking you to be, while at the same time trying not to lose you, right? Try not to lose you. So what this pandemic has exposed, it's exposed parents out. We've been able to notice that we are stressed more, right? Burnout happens much more quicker than it used to. Unraveling at the seams sometimes, depending on the culture and the situation of what's going on either at home or what's going on at home with work and all of the things you have to balance. And just also the ability of being able to be resilient and bounce back. I think that is really, really challenging for parents and families. But most importantly, I think sometimes we don't always recognize the strengths of our family. And so we don't always operate from the strength-based part of what you are doing. That is powerful, that is important, that your children do recognize. And so if you haven't done this yet, I do want you to take a few minutes to give yourself a pat on the back, to celebrate yourself, to honor yourself, and to say to yourself, great job. Because I cannot remember the last time I heard someone else thank me for being a parent, let alone, and just sort of looking at myself and saying, you know what, Cole, you're doing okay. It isn't where you wanted to be, but guess what? You made it through the night. So if you are not encouraging yourself, I just want to encourage you, right? Because it does become overwhelming and you can get lost in your thoughts. And so as we're moving through this, I just want you to recognize the importance of your mental health in terms of making sure that you work on trying to create those mantras that are positive. So resiliency is something that I'm seeing, and then just being hopeful. I think through all of this, I think that's the one thing that I hold on to, is this level of hope that things will get better, and that what was one problem one night won't be the problem tonight, right? So I pulled a couple of slides out that sort of highlights what what this pandemic has made our lives look like, especially if you're working from home and you have children at home. So I thought this slide was pretty powerful in terms of, setting priorities up as it relates to children. I have definitely been on some Zoom calls and some trainings where I've seen kids sort of pop up out of nowhere. I've seen pets kind of pop up into the screen as well, just to let everybody know that they're there. I've even had parents thought that they were muted and they weren't muted, right? And I think that we've all had experiences as it relates to trainings or just in work-related rooms where we've seen real life happen right in front of us in real time. And so I think that it is so important that we lend some freedom and some grace to recognizing that we are all trying to figure this thing out. I love this one. It says, when you're a never ending conference call and your kids be like, so they just sort of hop in there, right? This I thought was beautiful. I think this is so important, always trying to find that space. Now please believe this backdrop I got going on, it looks real good, but if I were to swing this camera around, you'd be like, oh, wow, okay, right? So we found spaces in our rooms to, kind of make things look a little cozy underneath all the chaotic stuff we've got going on. But I thought this was really awesome. Again, we're juggling family life, work life, and all of the things that go along with that. I'll tell you something that I probably shouldn't tell you, but I was actually in a meeting and was muted and was able to grab a shower while at the same time. So that's the power of what we're able to do through through Zoom. Now everything was, of course, muted and there were no images, right? But I was able to do a couple of things that I wouldn't normally be able to do if I was actually at work in a building. So there is some fun flexibility to this as well. So one of the questions I have that I think is really important, we could either talk about it if someone wants to unmute and share, but also, want you to begin to think about a couple of these questions. And I put these questions in here because I think it's really important for us to begin to think about it. But how do you define yourself as a parent during this pandemic? Because how you define yourself really does have a huge impact on what those expectations are that you place on yourself as a parent. And so I don't know if there's anyone want to comment in the chat, and of course I can't see the chat. So if there is something that pops up, please share. But how do you define yourself, as a parent? And I think this image really speaks to, how parents are having to now multitask and do a host of things just to balance out the day. So if anybody wants to share, please do so. How do you define yourself as a parent? So I'm assuming no one is responding. Is that correct? Yes.
Come through slowly. I've got one or two.
Okay.
Now. And just to share out, they're really great answers. One, define themselves as creative, resilient, resourceful, stir crazy. I like that. Team player, a bigger kid, loving, caring, unconditional love, everything to everyone and nothing to myself. More irritable and impatient.
Yes.
Yeah, this stressed, overworked, loving, caring, protective.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for sharing, right? Because I do think it's important to really take some time to really see who we are, and also give ourselves some grace at who we aren't and who we strive to be, of course, but recognize that, man, you are also human too, and that your feelings also matter, and that you matter as it relates to your role and responsibilities to your family as well. So I do think it's, again, really important for us to really begin to, look at what our definitions are and not hold ourselves so, tightly to those definitions, but allow their opportunity for flexibility as it relates to being able to define who you are, or completely removing some of those definitions, right? I also say this is important too, right? How do you define yourself in your romantic relationships with your partner? And this is, of course, something you don't have to answer on a Zoom call in a room full of strangers. But I do think these are the kinds of conversations and concerns and topics that are coming up. I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, when the pandemic first started, oh man, and you had time to work from home and be home and be booed up. Oh man, it was great. But after a while of being booed up and both of you are not going to work and you're kind of at home with each other, little things start popping up. And it could be me, but I know little things started popping up and I'm like, oh, okay. So, man, you really do chew loud. Like, oh, okay, I'm irritated by that. Or, oh, yeah, you haven't had a pedicure in a while. That bothers me. Oh, like, so all these little nuances, or you like, okay, I'm gonna leave the house, and how about I'm not coming back? The kid, you can have the kids, you can have the house. I'm out of here. Like all of these kinds of small little things started taking place because, sometimes the pandemic has exposed, the amount of time that we spend being stretched doing a variety of things. And then it sort of pulled us all together in one home. And depending on if you have a partner or not, there became a lot of different types of challenges. So I know right now from people that I've worked with that therapy has now been something that they had not talked about, but due to the pandemic, they shifted into some therapy to, kind of support the relationship. So I do encourage you to recognize that these parts of your life they do matter too. And that we also can't forget that, how difficult it can be to be with a partner that you've been with forever. And then all of a sudden you're locked in forever too, in this small, I don't know what I'm trying to even say about it, but in this small room, and you're spending a lot more time with each other than you've had before. So little things sort of pop up. And we notice this with kids too, right? And just everybody wanting to get away from each other and everyone sort of being irritated, or you get the complete opposite where everybody's just really happy to be together and it's harmonious. You see that smile on my face. And who are you? I don't know about you, but man, I have definitely had to redefine myself. I've really had to, I would have put a picture of me in here like that, but I didn't think it was appropriate. But but I do think there have been experiences where you just sit on your bed and you're just kind of like, what in the world am I doing? What did I sign up for? Who am I? What does this all mean? And so this challenge around really asking ourselves, who are we? And what am I doing? Does it matter? And I want you to know again that you are not alone in asking those questions for yourself. But it's also really important too that when you get to this place to really center yourself and do an assessment on yourself as well. So I thought these three questions really were important for me and for parents that I've worked with as we begin to talk about what it really means to, be a parent and be an adult and be a partner during a pandemic. And again, if anybody has any thoughts or comments as I'm moving through these slides, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat. So one of the questions I have, it says, when you hear the word stress, what's the first picture that pops up in your mind? I know when I hear the word stress, I think of chaotic, just being in a chaotic space. When I hear the word stress, my shoulders tense. When I think about the word stress, I start to have images of deadlines that I need to meet that typically stress me out. So those are the kinds of things that pop up. And I'm guessing if you're commenting in the chat or if you're not, you're probably thinking those same kinds of things. It could be, a host of things that cause us a level of stress, right? Where does your stress show up on you? I think that's really important to think about. If you haven't asked that question to yourself, you should. Where does your stress show up and where do you release it? Where does it come out at and who does it come out in front of? Where does it go when it comes out? Do you hold it all in? Do you release it in private spaces, or does everybody get access to seeing you? And so I think it's really important as we unpack our stress that we start to figure out where it goes, how it shows up, and what we do with it. Because that definitely matters, especially in terms of being in a home where everyone else can be triggered by your stress too. Or it could be vice versa, where your children could be overwhelmed and stressed, and it causes you to become stressed as well. So really recognizing where it's at, where does it go, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, cool. Someone put in the chat, stress shows up by not sleeping.
Yes.
A lot of people can relate to that. And just for you, we're at noon, so we've got about 30 minutes left.
Okay. My gosh, I just got started. What?
Don't shoot the messenger.
What? I just got started.
Sorry, everyone.
There's so much. See, I'm telling y'all, there should have been a part B. But what might you say or do when you're under stress? And again, folks, I just want you to recognize the power of stress. And there's good stress too, right? I know good stress can be a motivator. It could definitely get you charged and get you moving around and get you engaged. But I do think it's just highly important for us to start to recognize and take a look at our stress and where it goes and what we do with it. And I definitely think sleeping is definitely an indication of that. So here's a definition really quick, and we all know this, but a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from an adverse or very demanding circumstances. And that's of course, the definition of it, and that sounds great, but I think in the actual application of it, it becomes a very different thing when it comes to managing it, right? So here's a couple of things I tell people: failing is okay. If you're not failing, I don't know what you're doing. You should be failing. It makes sense. It says, so there's a couple of thoughts I put. The day didn't work out the way that I wanted it. Man, some days are not going to work out, folks. That's okay. You took Cole's training and nothing worked. Something will work. That was on you. So that's what I'm gonna say. You tried and it failed, and you had a setback. And I think, man, it's so okay to give yourself some grace as it relates to how you're navigating parenting and work and all of the things that you're responsible for. We don't give ourselves enough credit, and we definitely don't give ourselves grace and mercy. We tend to extend that for others, but you rarely tend to do that for yourself. And I just want to encourage everybody that's in this space with me to give yourself some grace and mercy, because in doing that for yourself, you have really the capacity, well, you have the ability to model that, the ability to model that for your children. And not only will they be able to offer that grace and mercy to others, they'll be able to actually do that for themselves. And I think that is one of the big pieces I've learned to this, is that sometimes modeling is really the best answer. We do a really great job of instructing folks, but it's really, really powerful when you can do it for yourself and other people see it through you. So just want to encourage you that. And a setback is a setup for your comeback. That is my mantra. That is what I use when I get overwhelmed and I get stressed out. I tend to tell myself my setback is my setup for my comeback. I'm also working on eating healthy. So when I went to the grocery store last week, I kept telling myself in the store, I am responsible. No, I said, Cole, you are responsible for what you eat. Cole, you are responsible for what you eat. Like, I literally kept echoing that as I moved down the aisles. And it's funny because as I was doing it, I was picking up healthy food, and someone was watching me, and then they came over and was asking me questions about the food that I had no real answer to. But I was just saying, hey, this is what I tell myself. And so it really helped. And then I won't tell you what I ultimately ended up doing, but I'm a work in progress, right? So if you see this image right here, you probably are already stressed, and just by looking at this image, especially if you have a little one at home, that tends to respond this way, sometimes for reasons you can't even really understand. But I wanted to take a few minutes to kind of navigate through some of this. And again, we may just get through maybe just a couple of these things, but I think it's important when we're talking about parenting in a pandemic, we have to also talk about children, right? And these are just some stress symptoms that I think are important for you as a parent to recognize. Again, I'm not going to read all of this due to time, but I just want to just point out that there is power in, as parents, practicing some self-care and self-awareness for ourselves, so that we begin to have the capacity to sort of really become behavior detectives and can recognize what's going on with our children when they begin to kind of behaviorally express things that are happening with them that they can't normally normalize verbally, right? So these are some of the things that you might see happen with birth through 6. And these are some of the things that you can do to sort of help. And I love this idea around using feeling words for language building. I love the idea of watch what you say or do. They will copy your responses to stress. So again, when you're tense, sometimes you can see your stress in your children based on how they may respond to you. So that might be sometimes a mirror for you to gauge where you are. And again, this sense of safety is really important for children. And I'm not going to go through all of this, right? I want to just say coping skills, mindfulness techniques. Deep breathing is an amazing thing that we can do. I tell parents you can do this with your kiddos. It's called the blow windmill fan or balloon. Like, these are just some of those things that you can do sometimes to just sort of help your children calm down and practice some stress relief practices. Signs and symptoms that you might see between a 7 and 12-year-old that you might, again, you want to pay closely attention to. A lot of times, some of our kiddos are stressed. For a long time, I was taught that kids don't get stressed, or I would have, as an adult, as my mother or my adults in my life would say things to me. What could you be possibly stressed out about? But again, sometimes our kids are echoing what they see, but they also are listening too. And I'm a big believer that sometimes it's not what we do in front of our kids that also impacts how they see the world and feel the world and experience the world. It's also what they hear from people around them in the environment that we shape for them that also can impact how they move and how they see and how they experience the world too. So it's so important that we're paying attention to those things too, because sometimes, again, children don't always verbalize, as we don't either. We don't always verbalize what's going on with us. Sometimes we may not even have the feeling word to express what we're feeling. And children, man, and especially if we're talking about children that have experienced any level of trauma, it's so important that we slowly become, and recognize behavior, and recognize that behavior is not how our children behave is not a personal attack against us. It's not a mandate against our parenting. It's just also that they're also little individual people that are experiencing the world just like us, but they may not have the adult lens to sort of be able to see and recognize what's going on with them internally, if that makes any sense. So how to help? These are just some things. Give them a list of emotions for language. Again, it took me a long time to express some of the things that I'm going through, let alone being able to, model that for children. So there's so many activities and some things that I'll share with you that you can use. But I love this bullet here. It says, establish a sense of safety. Safety is huge. It's taken me a long time to recognize what exactly safety looks like. But I've come to know, for me and my family and the culture that we live in, that safety really does mean allowing the space for children to fail, to be maybe somewhat out of control, but not, of course, out of control that it becomes harmful to themselves, but out of control in a way that makes sense as we are as adults to become unraveled. And that our threshold to take on issues and challenges sometimes can just reach a boiling point and we just explode. And recognize that we don't have to punish children because of that, but recognize there's something deeper that their behavior is trying to tell us. And as parents, if we are practicing our own self-care, if we have taken that time to do our own assessment, man, we can show up so well for children who, sometimes will become dysregulated and need us to be regulated enough so we can help navigate them through that tough time so that they feel safe, right? So I'm going to move through this because I think my love is really working with teenagers. Teenagers can be, if you are raising a teenager, they can be, man, the highlight of the day and the week, and they can be the worst day of the night and the day and cause you all kinds of trials and tribulations, and mainly because they have an amazing ability to not only push your buttons, but they're also still trying to figure out who they are and what they are and how they relate to the world. And so their world in so many ways can be completely opposite of yours. And so I think it's really important to sort of recognize, again, when we're healthy and we're balancing, and it's tough to do that too. In this, we also recognize that, our kids can be super stressed because they're also concerned about not only the pandemic, but a host of other things that are going on with them that sometimes goes unnoticed, especially if we're a parent juggling so much. And so I do believe that it's just so necessary and important that you're also, taking those times to sort of see, because some of these things that are in here totally makes sense for an average teenager. Self-absorbed, this increased need of independence, which might mean, hey, we want to do family time. Nope, I don't want to hang out with you. I'd rather be on my phone, FaceTime a friend of mine. Strained peer relationships, you may not know it, but they show up in the kitchen super upset, and you're already angry about something, or something frustrated you, and before you know it, words get exchanged, and now it's a whole blow up. And that really wasn't even an issue, but because, again, we aren't necessarily doing that self-centered work where we're calming ourselves and practicing some of the things that so many, professionals and so many people are telling us to do. It can be very difficult to do that when it really matters, right? How to help. Listen, this is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life when it comes to raising teenagers and toddlers and infants and babies, is to really listen. Well, no, I take that back. I'm good with listening to babies, because when babies cry, you got to do something. But when teenagers, it's more so listening to their behavior versus their verbal. And that was really difficult for me because I was a very much a knee reacting type of dad. Like, listen, this is what it is. I don't care about any of the other stuff. But it really took me a while to understand that I needed to listen to their behavior over the loud noise, because the behavior was the root that I really was trying to get to if I wanted to fix or resolve the problem. So I think it's really important for you to restrain your worries too to how you respond to situations that might pop up with your teenagers during this pandemic, and to do everything that you can to lean into the relationship versus away from the relationship. And that is just completely across the board with any relationship that you're having that becomes very difficult when you're navigating through this pandemic. You want to move into it if it's a relationship worth sustaining and having versus, removing yourself away from it because it's a conflict, right? So I'm gonna move through this. So a few tips on working from home. Where am I at, Felicia, on time?
Sorry, I was like so in it. We have 20 minutes left.
How much time do I have?
20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes. Woo, okay.
Not 2, sorry, 20.
Man, I got nervous. All right. So a few tips on working from home. Woo, man, somebody should have gave me these tips a long time ago. But we learn as we go, right? So working from home while under the quarantine with kids, create a schedule. I am probably the worst with scheduling and maintaining schedules, but I have learned that you need to have definitely a schedule that's set up for your working hours at home, but because you're working from home, right? And so to set those hours up where your family knows these are the office hours, so there's a certain time, but also not be so stuck in that you oftentimes miss those opportunities when there's something that's important going on with your kiddos. And also forgive yourself if you do have to stick to those working hours, right? Because I do think sometimes parents, man, we're bad at beating ourselves up about things that we didn't do within that day. And I don't know about you, but I am a processor. When my day ends, I will sit back and I'll look at my day as I'm starting to do my to-do list for the next day. And I'll also start to reflect about all the things I didn't do or the things I didn't say or the this and this and this and this. And before you know it, before I even get a chance to go to sleep, I'm already stressed because I'm thinking about all the things that I, didn't do, or I could have said this. And so I want to echo to you the idea of really giving yourselves grace and mercy. If you don't learn anything from this training, or didn't hear anything from what I just said, I want you to hear that the grace and mercy you give to yourself is so important and so vital, because it literally helps you do the best work, and you're able to show up for your kids, but most importantly, showing up for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. So I just want you to know that as you're navigating these things and creating these different types of tools to sort of balance your family, know that it's okay to make an error and make a mistake, and just say it's okay, and we'll get it right the next day, or we'll do something different. So I love this idea around coloring outside of the lines. Man, color outside of the lines, parents.
Cool. There was a question, and I just thought it was a great question, really. The question was, so I have a schedule, but how can I make it fun so that they don't dread it?
What was the first part? I have
a schedule, right? Yes. I create the schedule, but how do I make it fun so parents don't dread it, or so that the kids don't dread it?
Well, I would say invite them into the scheduling. I think sometimes we're so amazing at, just sort of doing it for our kiddos that we forget to invite them to it, so that they can also be a contributing member to what could be fun. And I've learned sometimes what's fun for parents aren't fun for kids. So if you bring the two of you guys together and you sit and you outline what that schedule could look like, then it could be fun. But I think that it requires that. I think it also requires us not being adults. Sometimes, man, my son said it best, you guys. And I don't know if you have any children that don't have a problem telling you what they really think. But I had a son that did not have a problem telling me what he thought about me. And he often said to me, Dad, you make adulthood look horrible, and I don't want to be an adult. And that's why I'm so immature, because I don't want to grow up and be stuck in these things that I see adults doing. So I was like, oh, one, I had a script, so I was ready to go in. Like, I pay the bills, I do all that stuff that parents do when they go into script mode. But he really helped me see that, you know what? Oh, it's okay to not be an adult today. And sometimes just show up. And guess what? The world isn't going to fall apart. It's also going to help your kiddos see that, oh, you aren't perfect. Oh, you can be fun. Oh, and all of the things that, sometimes we think we are, but we really aren't. it's so important. So I would say invite your kids to that. And if they're really young, there's all kinds of things I think that you can Google to sort of find age appropriate stuff that can make the schedule fun, if that makes sense. Capitalize on nap time. If you have some little ones at home, man, when they are asleep, find some time. That could be some time for you, a 10-minute, 20-minute rest break, or a 10-minute, 20-minute breather, or maybe just a 10 and 20-minute opportunity, or 30 minutes to concentrate on something that's really important. But I do think it's important that you find that time, and capitalize on those moments when it is quiet in your home. Helping children through COVID-19. I think this is another big piece of the puzzle that has been very stressful for parents, not only of the uncertainty of this pandemic, but also how to support your kiddos as they are feeling uncertain and just not sure what this whole thing is about as well. You know, navigating and getting kids to the store or getting them to the school. Should I take them? Should I leave them in the car? Like, just this host of things that I think parents are, already, you already had a host of things you've had to worry about. Now this is in addition to that list of worries you've had to add to your to-do list. I'll just say that what kids really are saying to us is that children want to know, am I safe? And they can only know that through you and through the things that we've talked about previously. Are you the people caring for me safe? So if you don't know this, your children also worry about you. They also pay attention to what's happening to you, and they can also gauge their emotions and feelings directly from you. And again, that's a lot of responsibility, from us as parents, but it's so important that we're, again, gauging and assessing who we are and where we are, and being okay to say, if it's age appropriate, just kind of what your concerns are and your fears, but just, again, supporting them in that. And how will this situation affect my daily life? Kids are asking these questions whether or not they're asking you. They're thinking about them. And we know from working with kids so often that kids have the amazing ability, or children have the amazing ability to, be magical, use magical thinking. And quite often they'll imagine something that isn't really even true, or real. So I think it's so important that these three things we're doing on a regular basis to really center our kids and help them know that that it's okay. It's okay. It says, here are a few tips on how to engage with kids of all ages. Control your own anxiety. Talk with folks who support you. Take care of your physical health. If your child asks you if you're worried, be honest. Again, when we talk about emotional stability for children, we have to begin to also talk about the emotional stability of the parent. And I think, again, the more and more that and this is hard, because, again, some parents, and I can add myself to that plate, I'm really good at taking care of everybody else around me. I'm really good at that. That is a skill set I have. I'll take care of you. Don't worry about me. I got it. And that actually used to be a word I've had to change. I got it. I got it. I got it. And saying I got it, it also prevents people from having it. And then I move into passive aggressiveness when no one cares about me. Nobody recognizes what I'm going through. Nobody sees me. Nobody hears me. Well, I'm so good at making sure people don't, because I'm so good at taking care of everyone, that I don't leave space for others to have the ability, or I don't give people permission to do the same for me. And then I'm upset when they don't do it, right? And so I think that part of this pandemic has helped me see that I also have to be in tune with myself, and being okay to allow people to do the very same things I am doing for people. And again, I'm gonna use a word that's really powerful in this that I've had to work through, is trust, right? And so I'm being transparent as I move through this, as I talk about myself, because I do think it's important to recognize that these are some very key factors in how we are unbalanced or balanced in our family lives navigating the pandemic. There are a lot of misinformation for kiddos, so you want to ask these open-ended questions. And again, we could do a 2-hour presentation just talking about this alone, and how to create open-ended questions. But these are just a few questions that I think are important for kiddos to have, for you to be able to ask, and so that you can also hear from them about what's going on in their mind. It says the real cradle that, and so this is really important. This is something I recently learned, and I hope I align the slides correctly. And but it says the real cradle that babies are nursed in is the emotional climate between parents. And I think this is really, really important around the work, especially when we're talking about kiddos in foster care, but just kiddos in general. That emotional climate is tremendously important. and how we are supporting and parenting kiddos. And so I just want to talk about emotional coaching. I've read about this and have been doing some work around it, and it's just mind blowing for me. So I'll read this. It says parents have different reactions to emotions in their children. Emotional coaching means when an emotion shows up in your child, you treat it as useful information. You engage your child around it in a way that tells them it is okay to have that emotion. I don't know about you, but when I originally heard that and read that, it was mind blowing for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a very real thing. So emotional coaching is very real for us and how we engage our children and give them permission to communicate about what they're feeling. It says emotional dismissing is really the dismissing of that feeling, especially if that feeling is unpleasant for us as adults. Or unacceptable is the word, but I like the word unpleasant because a unpleasant feeling that can be centered back to our children can cause us to respond in a certain way. And especially if they show up in these types of ways. It says raising an emotional intelligent child. I think that's actually the name of the book. But it says when a child shows pride versus anger, we tend to respond very differently. When we may react different, like at home versus out at shopping. I can tell you the most stressful time for parents is in the shopping stores. I see parents lose it sometimes in those spaces. More so, not so much now because I hardly ever see kids in the grocery store. Now that I think about it, but cultural factors are at play too when it comes to the gender and age of a child in terms of how we react and respond to their emotions. So I just think that it's really important again for us to be mindful that our children's emotions do play a huge role in how we respond and react, but that also can be triggered back to where we are and what's going on with us. So I'm going to wrap us up and talk a little bit about the importance of self-care. You guys all know this. You all hear it. You've learned it. Everybody talks about it. It's a buzzword. It's very similar to when we talk about the trauma and the trauma lens and trauma care. I think it's really centered around actually moving from actually hearing it, saying it, to actually doing it and living it. And those are actually very two different things, but it's so necessary in the work that you're doing. I also encourage you again to find ways to support yourself around your mental health. I've moved away from language that talks about mental illness, right? But really move into this idea around mental health and what does health mean as it relates to our mental stability. So I think that too, language plays a huge role in what happens with us and how we feel and respond. Self-care, it says as parents, our main job is to take care of our kids, including our adult children. It's hard to think of anything more important than our children's well-being, right? That's what we believe. But I also think that part of this is carving out the time to do what you need to do for yourself. And I love, well, of course, if you've ever been on a plane, they always advise you to put on the oxygen mask first before you put it on for anybody else next to you or your children. So there's a reason for that. And I think that operating out of that reason really can help you balance some of the challenges you may be experiencing on a daily. And again, folks, don't beat yourself up. So again, this idea of sort of setting some priorities. It says, as parents, we can't do everything. Now, I'm gonna just read that sentence again. I actually want to just read it for the rest of the presentation. As parents, you can't do everything. You can set the priorities, you can set up the calendar, you can do all of that, right? And then all of a sudden, everything goes awry, and everything that you originally had planned doesn't go the way you want it. So it's okay that it doesn't happen the way that you had planned it. It's okay that the calendar goes a little left. There's always flexibility in that, right? And that's life. And I just think that it's important again to sort of give yourselves that grace and mercy to recognize that it's okay. And I'm going to ask this again, and I apologize. Oh, I see we're getting close to wrapping up. So just really quick, this. You want to make sure you're eating. You want to be happy, try to find happiness. It's amazing what happens when the adult who's leading the family is happy, because that happiness can echo. And even if someone's irritated, it's really hard to when you're around happy people to stay irritated. So find some time to laugh and to enjoy each other. It definitely makes this ride that we're on less stressful. Was that choose fun things to do. So find times to do, find times and opportunities to do things that are fun. Grand Rapids has some really cool things around going downtown and getting on those scooters. I tried it. It was fun. I love eating, so find opportunities to eat, but just find opportunities to hang out, go to the park, walk, bicycle, go bicycling. Just find times where you can get out the house and just really ground yourself in nature. Go outside without your shoes on and, feel the ground, feel the dirt, dig deep into it and just get connected. You'd be surprised how that in itself can be, remove us from all this technology that we're on. So just sort of grounding yourself with nature. And I'm gonna actually stop because there's so much that's still in this slide. But I want to just give some opportunity for folks if there's any questions that they might have or any things that they want to share. I want to give space for that. Anything that stands out. This last slide is pretty powerful, folks. Find folks to take care of you. 2 questions I'm asking: who in your life cares for you? And who do you trust to nurture you, to give you advice, listen to you, or comfort you during a rough spell? Those are really important questions to ask yourself in balancing, parenting in the pandemic. And if you don't have those people, work to develop that within yourself. But also there are people, if you look closely, and building your natural supports. And so I just want to encourage you to, to do those things. And I'm going to move my slide. As y'all about to see, I have so much going on in this slide. But here is, my contact information. Yeah. So thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Cole, for sharing. And if you guys have any other questions for Cole specifically, like he said, it's there in the screen. I'm also going to send a follow-up email after this training. It's going to have a few things in there. One is going to have Cole's information to reach out to him with any questions. The other is going to just be information about foster kids, how to get involved if you're ready to take that next step in becoming a foster parent, as well as our training series, Parenting Through Trauma, for the rest of the month for Foster Care Awareness Month. The other thing that's going to be in there that I think is really cool, Foster Kids has created a resource guide for parents. And it's a pretty hefty document, but it's a great resource for parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, and it is resources for pretty much everything: hair and skincare, mental health resources, community partners, all of that. So if anything comes up, guys, anyone on this call today where you guys feel like you didn't have a chance to get your question asked, we have a couple more minutes if you feel comfortable speaking up. But if not, we put the email to contact Foster Kids in the chat. And then we're also going to share Cole's information. So we have about 2 more minutes left if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask Cole any questions.
How do you create a safe space for kids who just started fostering in your own home? Like when you don't know much about them, they are just been through so much trauma of separation and removal. How do you even begin that safe space?
Yeah, I think the best way with that is definitely you become the safe space by making sure that you are healthy when you show up, that you're consistent when you're showing up, when there is let's say a disruption, that you are staying balanced, that you're not reacting to that behavior in a way that shows a level of distress. They are looking for that. And I've learned from kiddos, they are very hyper vigilant and they're waiting to see if you're going to like react and respond in a very stressful manner, because then they can, again, that echoes for them. Okay, how safe is this space? So I think when I think about safety, it isn't almost the physical safety. Yes, that's easy for folks. I think it's the psychological safety that's important for adults. And I think that's the part where it's so important for you to be grounded. And if you know that these things are, that they've been through those things, you're definitely going to just have to show up very, as I would say, healthy and well to just work through that with them. And that's continuing to be caring, loving, nurturing, all those things that you naturally are when deciding to, raise kiddos that are coming from those backgrounds. I think that's the best way to do it, is just you showing up and being consistent with your emotions and sort of checking that stuff at the door when there's an outburst that, might challenge you. So I don't know if that answered it, but that's been the thing that I've seen work really well. And that's actually a really great question. So thank you for asking me that. Yeah. Anyone else? There was a question in the chat. I can't remember what it was, and I felt like it was a good question, but I couldn't get a chance to read it. Well, okay. If there's no other questions, I'd just like to thank you guys for participating and spending your lunch break with me. I hope that was something that I shared that resonated with you. And again, if you have any questions and would like to, connect with me, please do so. You can reach me at colespeaks.com, or you can definitely reach me through email, colewilliams78@gmail.com. So thanks again. And thank you, Felicia, and for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Guys, the training hopefully will be up on the website by the end of the week, and then as well as certificates to anyone who put it in the chat. Those will also be emailed out by the end of the week. So any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for spending your lunch break with us.
Hey, Felicia, can you